What happens when glory turns into disaster? When a legend in the making takes one wrong step and it all comes crashing down? For the Raiders, a team built on rebellion and risk, those stories are everywhere. The Raiders have always lived on the edge. They've gambled on wild talent, taken chances on fiery coaches, and rolled the dice on trades no one else would dare. Sometimes, those gambles created unforgettable legends, but other times, the risk swallowed everything, and what was meant to be greatness ended in ruin. In this video, we dive into 10 moments when the Raiders, players, coaches, and entire decisions risked it all and lost. These are not just the obvious stories everyone repeats. We'll look deeper. From a quarterback once called the future of the NFL, who flamed out faster than anyone expected, to a coach brought back from the past only to deliver the worst season in Raiders history, to a superstar wide receiver whose career in silver and black ended before he ever played a single game. Every story carries the same theme: bold dreams, high expectations, and brutal collapse. You'll hear about the millions of dollars wasted, the shattered careers, the missed opportunities that could have changed NFL history. And you'll learn how the Raiders' willingness to risk it all built both their reputation for greatness and their legacy of heartbreak. Stay with us until the very end, because the final story might just be the boldest gamble of them all, a gamble that changed the Raiders forever. Welcome to History of Raiders, the place where football's wildest stories are brought back to life. If you love the drama, the history, and the untold truths of the game, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more. Now, let's begin. 10. Jon Gruden. In 2018, the Raiders made a decision that stunned the football world. They brought back Jon Gruden, the fiery coach who once led the team to greatness nearly 2 decades earlier. And this wasn't just a routine hire. This was a blockbuster move, sealed with a 10-year contract worth $100 million. At the time, it was the richest coaching deal in NFL history. The risk was clear. The Raiders were not simply hiring a coach. They were betting the future of the franchise on a man whose best days were in the early 2000s. Gruden had been out of coaching for years, working as a TV analyst, far from the grind of the sideline. Could he adjust to a new NFL, faster and more complex than ever before? The Raiders believed he could. They believed his fiery energy and sharp football mind would bring the team back to glory. At first, the results were mixed. Gruden's return was dramatic, but not always successful. He traded away star players like Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, moves that shocked fans and critics alike. The idea was to rebuild the roster in his own vision, no matter the cost. There were flashes of progress, moments where the team looked tough, creative, and dangerous again. But consistency was always missing. The team hovered between promise and frustration, never quite reaching the heights that had been promised when Gruden returned. And then in 2021, everything collapsed. A series of leaked emails revealed messages written by Gruden years earlier, filled with offensive language and shocking remarks about players, officials, and even league leaders. The scandal spread like wildfire. The NFL and the Raiders faced enormous pressure, and Gruden was forced to resign. It was a stunning fall of grace, one of the most expensive and dramatic in football history. The Raiders had poured money, faith, and their entire future into a coach they believed would restore their identity. Instead, the story ended abruptly in controversy, leaving behind questions, regrets, and a reminder that sometimes the boldest bets can implode without warning.
9. Hugh Jackson. When Hugh Jackson took over the Raiders in 2011, he promised change. He was bold, fiery, and aggressive. The kind of coach who didn't just want to manage games, he wanted to shape the entire future of the team. The Raiders had been stuck in years of mediocrity, searching for an identity after the death of Al Davis. Jackson believed he could be the one to turn the tide. And for a moment, it looked like he just might. The Raiders started that season strong. They fought with energy, and for the first time in years, fans felt hope. Jackson wasn't afraid to gamble on fourth downs. He called risky plays, and he motivated his roster with a confidence that was hard to ignore. The team reached a 7-4 record, standing on the edge of the playoffs. But everything changed in Week 6, when quarterback Jason Campbell broke his collarbone. Just like that, the offense had no leader. Most coaches would have accepted the season as lost. Not Hugh Jackson. He decided to roll the dice. In one of the most daring moves of that era, Jackson traded for Carson Palmer. The Raiders gave up a first-round pick and a second-rounder. A massive price for a quarterback who had been sitting in retirement, refusing to play for the Bengals. For Jackson, it was worth the risk. He believed Palmer could step in, save the season, and carry the Raiders into the playoffs. At first, the gamble looked shaky. Palmer hadn't played, wasn't in football shape, and struggled with turnovers. The Raiders stumbled down the stretch, losing 4 of their last 5 games. They ended the season 8-8. Not terrible, but far from the promise of the playoffs. Jackson, though, didn't hold back. He declared himself the man who should control the Raiders' future, saying he would take a hands-on role in rebuilding. But when new management arrived, they saw things differently. Instead of giving him more power, they fired him. Just like that, the Hugh Jackson experiment was over. 8. Art Shell. In Raiders history, few names carried as much weight as Art Shell. He wasn't just a coach. He was a Hall of Fame offensive lineman, a Super Bowl champion, and a man who embodied the toughness of the silver and black. Back in 1989, when Al Davis made him the Raiders head coach, Shell broke barriers as the first black head coach in the modern NFL era. And during his first run, he delivered results. Playoff appearances, winning seasons, and a steady hand at a time when the franchise was still feared. But by the mid-1990s, Shell was gone. The Raiders moved on, and so did he. For 12 years, he stayed away from the head coach's chair, working around the league in other roles. Yet in 2006, with the team in decline and fans desperate for direction, Al Davis turned back to a familiar face. The gamble was clear. Bring back a legend, a symbol of the Raiders' proud past, and hope he could restore the fire. On paper, the move carried romance. It spoke to nostalgia, to tradition, to the idea that Raiders' glory could be reborn by the very man who had lived it. But the NFL had changed. The game was faster. Schemes were more complex. And Art Shell, after more than a decade away, walked back into a league that had passed him by. The season unraveled almost from the start. The offense sputtered, scoring fewer than 11 points per game, dead last in the NFL. Quarterbacks were under constant pressure. The line, once Shell's specialty, collapsed week after week. And the locker room? It fractured. Stories leaked of tension between players and coaches, of a team that no longer believed. By the time the season ended, the record told the story. 2 wins, 14 losses. The worst in franchise history. What was meant to be a triumphant return became a painful reminder that the past cannot always be recaptured. Al Davis's bet on nostalgia had backfired in spectacular fashion, and the Raiders were left in ruins, not just beaten, but embarrassed on a national stage.
7. Lane Kiffin. In 2007, the Raiders made one of the boldest moves in franchise history. Al Davis, The legendary owner, known for his just-win baby mentality, hired a 31-year-old offensive coordinator from USC to be the new head coach of the Raiders. His name was Lane Kiffin. At the time, Kiffin was the youngest head coach in modern NFL history. For a team desperate to rebuild, it looked like a daring, maybe even brilliant gamble. Kiffin arrived with a reputation for creative play calling and a sharp football mind. He had helped USC's offense dominate college football. Al Davis believed that fresh energy, paired with bold offensive ideas, could spark a struggling franchise back to life. But this was no ordinary job. The Raiders were already in turmoil. Years of bad drafts and constant coaching changes had left the team without stability. Kiffin was walking into a storm. From the start, the relationship between Kiffin and Davis was uneasy. Kiffin wanted to reshape the roster, build his own system, and take the team in a modern direction. Davis, stubborn and controlling, was unwilling to hand over that much power. Tensions boiled over quickly. Reports emerged of disputes about draft picks, about free agents, even about which quarterback should start. In one infamous moment, Kiffin allegedly tried to resign after just one season, but Davis refused to let him go. On the field, results were no better. The Raiders finished 4-12 in Kiffin's first year. Fans were restless, and the locker room was divided. Still, Davis held on, perhaps hoping the young coach would eventually prove him right. Instead, the clashes only grew worse. Early in Kiffin's second season, after just 4 games, Al Davis fired him in spectacular fashion. The press conference announcing the decision turned into a public spectacle, with Davis airing grievances on live television. It was pure Raiders drama, chaotic, shocking, and unforgettable. Kiffin's time with the Raiders lasted only 20 games. What was supposed to be a daring youth movement turned into one of the shortest, most turbulent coaching stints in NFL history. And the Raiders, already struggling, were once again thrown into instability. 6. Antonio Brown. When the Raiders signed Antonio Brown in 2019, the hype was electric. Brown was not just another wide receiver. He was one of the best in the NFL. 6 straight seasons with over 1,000 yards, a master of routes, a nightmare for defenders. The Raiders believed he could transform the franchise. He wasn't just a player, he was supposed to be the face of their new era. The risk was massive. Oakland sent draft picks to Pittsburgh and handed Brown a contract worth tens of millions of dollars. It was a bold move, the kind Al Davis himself would have admired. The message was clear. The Raiders were done rebuilding. They were ready to win, and Antonio Brown was the weapon who would lead them there. But almost immediately, everything started to unravel. Training camp should have been Brown's grand introduction to Raider Nation. Instead, he showed up with frostbitten feet, the result of a botched cryotherapy session. Unable to practice, he spent weeks on the sideline, turning headlines into late-night jokes. Then came the helmet saga. The NFL had banned his old model, but Brown refused to let it go. He filed grievances, threatened retirement, and stormed off the practice field more than once. While teammates worked to prepare for the season, Brown's fight with the league over headgear became the story of the summer. Behind the scenes, things grew even stranger. Reports surfaced of arguments with coaches. He missed team meetings. When general manager Mike Mayock fined him for skipping practice, Brown reportedly cursed him out in front of the team. The standoff between superstar and organization was reaching a breaking point. Finally, before the Raiders ever played a single regular season game, Antonio Brown was gone. Released after weeks of chaos, his time in silver and black ended before it had ever truly begun. No touchdowns, no highlights, not even one snap in the regular season. A blockbuster signing had turned into a surreal spectacle, leaving Raiders fans stunned and the team holding nothing but wasted money and empty promises.
5. Carson Palmer. In 2011, the Raiders faced a crossroads. Their starting quarterback, Jason Campbell, had gone down with a broken collarbone. The season still held promise. They were in playoff contention for the first time in years, but without a quarterback, the dream was slipping away. The team was desperate, and desperation leads to bold moves. That's when the Raiders turned their eyes to Cincinnati. Carson Palmer, a former Heisman Trophy winner and two-time Pro Bowler, was sitting out the season. He had clashed with the Bengals front office, demanded a trade, and declared he would rather retire than wear orange and black again. To the Raiders, Palmer looked like the perfect answer. A proven arm, still only in his early 30s, waiting to be rescued from exile. So, Al Davis's Raiders made the call. They offered not just one, but two high draft picks, a first-rounder in 2012 and a second-rounder in 2013. It was a steep price, one of the richest trades for a quarterback at the time. For Oakland, it was the ultimate gamble, a chance to save their season with a veteran leader. Palmer arrived quickly. Within days of joining the team, he was already under center. The results were mixed. He showed flashes of the talent that once made him a top pick, launching deep balls and rallying the offense. But the timing wasn't there. The Raiders went 4-5 the rest of the way, missing the playoffs once again. The following year, Palmer played a full season. Statistically, it wasn't terrible. He threw for over 4,000 yards, showing toughness and accuracy at times. But turnovers haunted him, and the Raiders' defense was among the worst in the league. Wins never came. The team finished 4-12, and the optimism that had surrounded his arrival evaporated. By 2013, the Raiders were ready to move on. Palmer was traded away to Arizona for a late-round pick. The once expensive investment had been flipped for scraps. And those draft picks the Raiders gave up, Cincinnati used them to keep building, while Oakland remained trapped in mediocrity.
4. Randy Moss. When the Raiders landed Randy Moss in 2005, it felt like destiny. Moss was a superstar, a game-breaking wide receiver who had lit up defenses with the Minnesota Vikings. Al Davis, the Raiders' legendary owner, had always loved speed and spectacle. Moss was both. The Raiders paid a heavy price, a first-round draft pick, a seventh-rounder, and a solid linebacker. On top of that, they gave Moss a contract worthy of his reputation. It was a huge gamble, but the vision was clear. Moss would revive the silver and black, bring back the glory days, and strike fear into secondaries once again. But from the very start, the fit wasn't right. The Raiders were not the same powerhouse they had been just a few years earlier. Their offense was broken. The quarterback situation was a revolving door. The offensive line struggled to protect, and the playbook often left Moss stranded, running deep routes with no one who could get him the ball. Instead of fireworks, fans saw frustration. Moss himself seemed to lose interest. Known for his competitive fire in Minnesota, he looked disconnected in Oakland. There were moments, a few flashes of brilliance where he reminded everyone of his talent, but those moments were rare. Most Sundays, Moss jogged through routes, his body language showing what words could not. He didn't want to be there. The tension grew. Reporters noticed his frustration. Fans questioned his effort. And the Raiders, who had invested so heavily in him, were left wondering how it had all gone wrong so quickly. 2 seasons in silver and black produced little more than disappointment. 11 touchdowns across 2 years, numbers far below what Moss had been known for. And the Raiders' record during his tenure? A dreadful 6-26. In 2007, the experiment ended. The Raiders traded Moss to the New England Patriots for a mere 4th-round draft pick. It was a fraction of what they had paid. And then came the cruelest twist. Almost immediately, Moss rediscovered his fire. In his very first season with Tom Brady, he shattered the NFL record for touchdown receptions, scoring 23. The same player who looked lost in Oakland suddenly looked unstoppable again.
3. Bo Jackson. There are legends in sports, and then
there is Bo Jackson, a man so gifted he wasn't just good at one sport, he was extraordinary at two. In the late 1980s, Bo was already making headlines as a star outfielder in Major League Baseball. But that wasn't enough. He wanted more, and the Raiders wanted him. When Los Angeles drafted Bo in 1987, they knew the risks. Here was an athlete splitting his time, playing summers with the Kansas City Royals and joining the Raiders once baseball season was done. For most players, that would be impossible. But Bo wasn't most players. The Raiders believed his rare talent could change the game, even if they only had him part-time. And when he stepped on the field in silver and black, the gamble seemed worth it. Fans still remember the power, the speed, the way he ran past defenders as if they were standing still. There was that famous Monday Night Football run against the Seahawks in 1987. Bo broke through the line, sprinted down the sideline, and kept running all the way into the tunnel. Moments like that made him larger than life. He wasn't just a football player, he was a phenomenon. But greatness carries a cost. In January 1991, during a playoff game against the Cincinnati Bengals, Bo broke free for what looked like another routine run. Then it happened. A tackle twisted his hip in a way no one expected. At first, it didn't look catastrophic. Bo even walked off the field under his own power. But inside, the damage was done. A dislocated hip, followed by complications, would end his NFL career in an instant. For the Raiders, it was crushing. They had built dreams around a player who seemed unstoppable, a man who could change a game in a single play. The risk of relying on someone who lived a double life between baseball and football had finally caught up. Bo's time with the Raiders was brief, just 4 seasons, but unforgettable. Every carry felt like it could become a highlight. Every appearance carried the weight of myth. And yet, just as quickly as he rose, the story ended, leaving fans wondering what might have been if Bo Jackson had stayed healthy. 2. Todd Marinovich. Long before he ever stepped onto an NFL field, Todd Marinovich was a headline. His story didn't start like most athletes. It started with an experiment. From the moment he could walk, Todd's father, Marv Marinovich, a former NFL lineman, decided his son would be the perfect quarterback. There were no candy bars, no fast food, not even a slice of birthday cake.
His diet was measured. His training was constant. Every day of Todd's childhood was built around one goal: creating the ultimate football machine. Sports writers later called him Robo QB. He was the product of science, discipline, and relentless control. By high school, he was a star in California. By college, at USC, he was already carrying the weight of impossible expectations. Every throw, every game, every decision was magnified. He wasn't just a player anymore. He was a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. In 1991, the prophecy seemed to come true. The Raiders used a first-round draft pick to select him. They believed they had found their future, a young quarterback with the arm talent to lead them back to glory. The Raiders had gambled, knowing his father's strict methods had built him differently than anyone else. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential. And for a brief moment, it looked like it might work. Marinovich started games as a rookie. He showed flashes of brilliance, quick throws, calm under pressure, the kind of talent that made scouts rave. But behind the scenes, the perfect image was crumbling. The boy who had never been allowed a normal childhood had discovered freedom in the worst way. Alcohol, drugs, the very things he'd been shielded from became the very things that consumed him. The pressure of being Robo QB was unbearable. The spotlight, the constant comparisons, the burden of living up to his father's design, it all cracked him. Within 2 seasons, the dream was over. Arrests followed. Failed drug tests piled up. The Raiders' bold experiment, turning to a quarterback raised in a laboratory of discipline, had ended in chaos.
Number 1. Jamarcus Russell. In 2007, the Raiders were desperate for a savior. The team had stumbled through losing seasons, and fans wanted hope. That hope came in the form of a towering quarterback from LSU, Jamarcus Russell. At 6'6", with a cannon for an arm, Russell looked like the kind of player who could rebuild the silver and black into champions. The Raiders used the number 1 overall pick on him, passing up other stars of that draft class, and handed him a record-breaking contract worth $61 million. On paper, it felt like a masterstroke. Scouts marveled at his physical gifts. He could throw the football 70 yards downfield with a flick of the wrist. Some compared him to John Elway. The Raiders were convinced they had found their next franchise quarterback, the man who would carry them out of the darkness. But from the very beginning, warning signs appeared. Russell held out for months before signing his deal, missing valuable training camp time. When he finally arrived, coaches noticed his lack of focus. He struggled with reading defenses, with playbooks, with conditioning. Instead of becoming sharper, he grew heavier. Rumors spread of late-night fast food runs and poor work habits. Fans waited for the moment when his raw talent would shine. There were flashes, a deep bomb down the sideline, a glimpse of the arm strength that had once wowed scouts. But the consistency never came. By his 3rd season, the problems were undeniable. The Raiders were losing, Russell's numbers were dismal, and whispers of him being unprepared grew louder. Stories surfaced that coaches had once given him blank DVDs to study game film, and the next day, Russell swore he had watched them. The dream was unraveling. Within just 3 years, the quarterback who was supposed to be the face of the franchise was gone. The Raiders had spent millions, gambled their number 1 pick, and ended up with one of the most infamous busts in NFL history. For Raiders fans, the name Jamarcus Russell doesn't just recall failure, it recalls a moment when the team bet everything on raw talent and watched the gamble slip away.
The Raiders have always stood apart in the NFL. While other teams play safe, the Raiders live on the edge. It is part of their identity, the willingness to take risks when others would hesitate. And that is why their story is so fascinating. In this video, we've looked at 10 moments when those risks did not pay off. From the number 1 draft pick who became a cautionary tale, to the coaches who promised a new era but delivered disappointment, to the stars who were supposed to save the franchise only to vanish in controversy, injury, or defeat. Each story is different, but the pattern is clear. The Raiders reach for greatness by gambling big. Sometimes the result is legendary, unforgettable plays, seasons that live forever in NFL history. But sometimes the risk burns too hot. It leaves behind broken careers, wasted millions, and fans asking what might have been. That is what makes the Raiders' legacy so unique. They are not simply a team that wins or loses, they are a team that dares, and daring always comes with a price. The Raiders' history is exciting because it is unpredictable. It shows us the fine line between glory and failure. It reminds us that boldness creates heroes, but also tragedies. And it leaves us with stories that continue to shock, inspire, and even warn us about the cost of taking chances. In the end, the Raiders' story reminds us that glory always demands a gamble. But sometimes the gamble takes everything. Thank you for watching this journey through Raider history. If you enjoyed uncovering the drama, the risks, and the forgotten moments that shaped this franchise, make sure to subscribe to History of Raiders for more. Because the story of the Raiders is never finished, and the next gamble is always just around the corner.